Welcome everyone. John Whatley with Stein Whatley Astorino, Louisville's personal injury law firm. I'm here with my partner Rob Astorino today, to my right. And today's topic is, how do I get my medical bills paid after a truck accident? Rob, tell the viewer how they would generally get their medical bills paid after a truck wreck.
So yeah, this is one of the most common questions that we get, and it's a major concern for someone who's been injured after they've been hit by a big truck. Is a lot of the first thoughts immediately after the wreck are, is everybody okay? You're looking around your car, and if somebody's not okay, we do live in America. Number one cause of bankruptcy is medical debt. So people are like, oh God, I'm having all these unexpected medical bills I didn't plan for. How am I going to get them paid for? And the good news is that there are many, many different ways after a big truck wreck that you can get your medical bills paid, which will ultimately not impact your financial situation at all. The first thing that we always have our clients look at is if they are Kentucky residents, or even if they're not. Kentucky is a no-fault insurance state, so if you've ever heard anything about no-fault insurance, PIP coverage, basic reparations benefits, anything along those lines, all that's referring to is a line of insurance that everyone in Kentucky is required to have that provides up to $10,000 to cover medical expenses that you incur in a car wreck, whether or not that car wreck's your fault. So right away, before any issues, before insurance for the trucking company gets in and tries to deny your liability, before they get in and try to gum up your claim, you have that $10,000 available, so you can go to the emergency room right away. You can get follow-up treatment if you need it, and that's something we see every day that we can help explain to people.
Okay, and the PIP, or personal injury protection insurance that you just discussed, where is that found?
So yeah, the funny thing is that we in the industry refer to it as PIP, or personal injury protection. In the insurance code itself, the actual law, it's not called that. It's just kind of a colloquial term that people use. But where this no-fault coverage comes from, the PIP or the basic reparations, is a line in the insurance code, and it's carried on almost every car insurance in Kentucky. So you can look to the car that you're traveling in, likely has PIP coverage that could be available to you. If you have a household vehicle in addition to that, there could be additional PIP coverage, or there could be PIP coverage there if you don't have it for some reason on the car that you're traveling in. If you don't own a vehicle, you may have PIP coverage through a household member who does own a vehicle, or there's even a provision for people who don't own vehicles to get no-fault coverage paid for through an insurance fund that's run by the state. So basically anyone in Kentucky, as long as they do pay for their insurance that they're required to have, will have access in some way to this PIP coverage. But it can get a little complicated because you got to look in multiple places sometimes. It's not always as easy as just calling your insurance agent and saying, hey, I need this coverage.
Okay. So for the average viewer that just got in a truck wreck, what's going to be the primary what's the primary insurance that's going to cover that PIP?
So generally the first place you look is the vehicle that you're traveling in. If it's not available through that, or there's additional coverage through one of these other sources, you can then look at your own vehicle. If you were not traveling in your own vehicle, a lot of times that's going to be the same car. You're traveling in your own vehicle, so those two are the same. But if you are traveling in someone else's car, generally their insurance covers it first, which is something you may not think about and you may not know to ask. Next, if neither one of those are, let's say you're a passenger in someone's vehicle and they're uninsured and you don't own a vehicle, then you can potentially look at PIP through your household or through that state fund that I talked about a second ago.
Okay, and are there any restrictions on household?
I don't know exactly what you mean by that.
In my experience, a lot of insurance companies require you to be either a relative in addition to being part of the household, and maybe we should probably also define what household means.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of situations where you have roommates in college. Even nowadays, there's young adults and professionals that have roommates. Does that mean that they are entitled automatically as a part of that household?
Sure, and this is something where it gets down into the weeds a little bit, because ultimately these are all coverages provided for by an insurance contract that you enter into, for your ability to drive. Everybody knows, I got to have state minimum insurance. Well, this is part of that. And so, if you don't have a vehicle and you're in a household with a family member, oftentimes if they have car insurance, there's a clause in that car insurance that extends to resident relative members. Exactly how far that coverage extends, the law kind of leaves that up to the insurance contract itself. And so that's something where, you would have to ask for the insurance contract from your agent or from your insurance broker, and start reading through the morass of the insurance contract to see exactly where that line is. And if you're trying to get PIP from someone else's insurance policy, you'd have to contact their insurance agent or their insurance broker. They may not give you the policy. They like to play games with that kind of stuff.
Well,
and
any truck accident lawyer in Louisville or over on the other side of the bridge in Indiana would easily be able to read the policy and determine that for you if you qualify.
Oh, sure.
I know we do that in our office, like with every case.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something we do every day. I'm just speaking from the point of, people who are in accidents themselves who may need this information. But certainly, any personal injury attorney, whether it's us, somebody else, reading insurance policies is something that we do every single day. We know exactly where this stuff is located. We know exactly the ways that they try to hide behind this stuff. And, that's a big point of stress that we cut out for our clients, is just cut through this contract language, determining which PIP policy or multiple PIP policies that they have benefits they're entitled to. And instead of the person after the wreck who needs the medical treatment having to spend their time reading and understanding these insurance policies, they just focus on their treatment, which is always the number one goal.
Right.
After an injury wreck is to, get the medical care you need, get back on your feet.
Yeah.
Those are the two things you should be worried about.
Well, if the viewer has any questions about whether or not they qualify for PIP, feel free to give us a call at our office, 502-553-4750. We're happy to talk to you about that and see if you qualify. Rob, you discussed a state fund available for payment of medical bills. Can you dive into that a little deeper?
Yeah, and so really, calling it a state fund isn't exactly correct, but that's kind of just the easiest way to talk about it. In Kentucky, the insurance companies are required to set aside a pool of money for no-fault benefits for out-of-state people who are insured or people who are not required to have insurance that they have to pay. So actually, there is a state office that kind of manages these claims and sends you to different places, but it will be an insurance company, maybe one that you've heard of, like State Farm or Progressive or something like that, that picks up that claim even though you're not insured with them, and is forced to offer you coverage. And I mean, let me tell you, they really do not like paying those because they don't get any money. And but it's part of the law. It's part of what they're required to do as part of writing insurance in this state. They all know they have to cover these claims. They really don't like doing it.
Yeah. So the process of getting that started, where do you start with that?
There's government form you have to fill out in addition to all the standard insurance forms that you have to fill out. Any PIP claim that you make through any carrier, even your own, you have to fill out a form letting them know, what your injuries are, where you're getting your medical treatment, that kind of thing. In addition, if you have to go through the assigned claims plan, which is the real name for that state system, You have to fill out additional state forms so that they can properly, guide your claim to where it needs to be. So there's a lot of paperwork. It's easy to make mistakes, but it is out there. It's government forms, just
right.
like anything else.
So let's kind of move on to the next level, because there's some other moving parts with getting your medical bills paid that are outside of the PIP scheme here in Kentucky. And can you dive into probably, I would say in our office, the primary way outside of PIP that people's medical bills get paid?
Yeah, so, and if you noticed earlier when I said most PIP has a $10,000 cap, that's not true for everything. We would need to see the actual insurance policy. You would need to see the actual insurance policy to know what the actual PIP benefits available to you are. But, for most people, most of the time, it's going to be $10,000. And that law was passed in the 70s when $10,000 was very different than what it is today. And you're probably thinking to yourself, that could be one ER trip. That could be half of one ER trip in a serious wreck. We've seen ER bills or initial hospital bills in serious truck wrecks that are into hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you're saying, wow, how do I get paid? How do I pay for my bills if I'm past that $10,000? So the next thing that we look at is your own personal health insurance. And when we tell people that, a lot of people, their first reaction is, wait a second, I wasn't at fault here. Why do I have to have my health insurance pay for things? Well, there's several reasons for that. One, your health insurance, like PIP, is no-fault insurance. It will pay for medical care regardless if your injury is your own fault or someone else's fault. And even in a wreck where fault is pretty clear on all these things, it can still take time for that to get sorted out. It can take time for the other party's insurance to do the right thing. They will try to slow walk the claim so that you don't get all the benefits you're entitled to. By using private health insurance, you can cut through that. You can start getting stuff paid for right away. The other major benefit that comes with health insurance is they generally have negotiation agreements with the medical providers that you're going to want to see anyway. They don't have them with everyone, but they have them with all the major hospitals and major doctors groups around town. So if you need that ER trip, if you need that surgery, immediately after the wreck, you can pay for it through your health insurance, either private health insurance or Medicare or Medicaid coverage. And that can streamline getting you the care that you need. Now, a lot of people, the reason they don't like using that private health insurance is because they may have out-of-pocket costs associated with that. And that's the really cool thing that, somebody who knows what they're doing can then step in and help you with, because that PIP coverage that we talked about earlier that can be earmarked for medical bills, it can also be set aside to pay for your out-of-pocket costs before medical providers get their hands on it. There's a very specific way you have to do that. It's easy to mess up, and hospitals know about that trick, and they try to come in and get that $10,000 before you have access to it. But there's ways to preserve that, to maximize that benefit from you.
Right.
That we know how to do.
On the topic of hospitals, one of the things that I see that's really aggravating that they tell their patients and our clients is that you have to use your PIP first before you can use your health insurance. That is absolutely not correct. In Kentucky, you have the ability to direct benefits. That's been established. And don't accept that whenever you go to the hospital for treatment, make sure that you, in addition to your car insurance information, that you also give them a copy of your health insurance card during the admissions process. It's very important because there are time frames in which you have to submit your claims after an injury or service for an injury. So make sure you do that. It's very important.
Yeah, and that's another thing that, if you go to the ER, you're focused on your treatment, you're focused on talking to your doctors and everything. The doctors are absolutely your friends in that. They're there to help get you better. The hospital administration staff is absolutely not your friend. They're there to maximize what you pay the hospital, and they're very good at that job because it's all they do.
Well, explain to the viewer why it's advantageous for the hospital to try to shift the bill to the PIP as opposed to your health insurance.
Two major reasons for hospitals. They get paid faster. And when I was mentioning earlier with that health insurance discount that you get, if hospitals go through the PIP, they get to eat up that benefit for themselves. So they don't preserve that for you. If you use private health insurance, part of, there will be additional work on your case at that point, because part of what you have to do if you use private health insurance is a lot of health insurances, and Medicare and Medicaid certainly, ask to get paid back if a third party is responsible for your injuries. And as we help manage your claim, that's something that we take care of for you and look out and make sure it's not messed up. It's a big mistake people make when they either use health insurance without realizing that there's other coverages available, or they use health insurance to try to get the benefit of their coverages instead of the hospital getting the benefit of their coverages. They don't realize they have to pay that money back, and then they get hit with a bill on the back end after they've settled their insurance claim, and they don't know where that money's going to come from because they've already spent everything.
Correct, right. And it's really important that the viewer understands that if you're going to do it yourself, you got to do it right, or make sure you have an attorney that knows what they're doing, because you have a contract with your insurance company. There's certain obligations you have. One of those is that you pay them back. You can have a suspension of benefits if you do not do that. And so it's really important that you do that in the right way as far as getting your insurance company paid their reimbursement, or sometimes it's called subrogation.
Yeah, I mean, it is sad. We've had a couple cases over the years come from attorneys that try to do this kind of work. They don't do it every day, and they have blind spots because there's at least 3 to 4 different coverages that interplay on every single big truck wreck. All the coverages have different orders in which they're supposed to be paid. Some of them are supposed to get paid back by other coverages, not necessarily the client themselves, but by other insurance coverages. And if you're on the job and you get hit by a big truck, there could be 5 or 6 different lines of coverage that all of a sudden become an issue, and then it really gets messy. And unfortunately, there's kind of this myth out there in the legal community. I know it was when I was going through law school. It probably was when you were too, John, that these personal injury cases are really easy, and they're cases that every attorney wants and can just do off the cuff, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. They're really easy to mess up. These are very difficult and involved cases, especially when you have multiple insurance lines and serious injuries. And when attorneys who don't do this every day try to get in there, they can make mistakes. And unfortunately, we've seen that happen to some of our clients over the years. Most of the time, they get to us in time, and we're able to clean everything up for them and get them a good result. But I'm sure just talking through this today, we've only been through 2 coverages so far. There's still more to talk about.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, I do also want to discuss a little bit. We kind of lumped it in with government benefits with health insurance, but maybe you could talk about some of the benefits and maybe the issues with using Medicare and Medicaid.
Yeah, I mean, Medicare and Medicaid have a lot of the same concerns as private health insurance. They are coverages that they call coverages of last resort. So even though they will step in right away and pay medical bills if we direct them to, or you direct them to, after a serious wreck, if there is, third-party recovery, and so those are the things that you may have heard from before, liability payments from the person who hits you and causes the injury for things like pain and suffering, medical bills, that kind of thing. health insurance, whether it's private, Medicare, Medicaid, they're going to come with their hand out and say, hey, you know, part of that's for us. And there are ways to make sure that you don't overpay that repayment, but it can get complicated. You know, we have cases every day where Medicare has an entire department, I think it's in Oklahoma, that is, all they do is send out letters to personal injury victims and personal injury attorneys saying, hey, where's our slice of the pie? And we have to get in there, aggressively protect our clients' rights, make sure they're not overpaying on that. And it's just one more thing, you know, to be aware of, that if you're handling something after a big truck wreck, you know, when you're worried about getting all your medical bills paid for, you got to think about the back end too. It's just one more thing that can complicate it.
Right. Let's say that there's a scenario where I'm involved in a big truck wreck. I'm riding in a car that does not have insurance. Maybe I don't have insurance on it. You know, that's my fault. However, I find myself in this situation. Can I still get medical treatment, and how would I get those bills paid that I owe if I don't have any sort of health insurance or government benefit available to me?
So if you have, you know, if you've exhausted all other options, and this is not even for somebody who, you know, may not have these insurances available to them, you know, there can be limits to things that insurances will pay. Right. There are also really, really good medical providers who only do injury work that do not take health insurance. There's some really bad medical providers that only do injury work that are in it for the money, but there are also some really good ones, right, that just specialize in that kind of work. And if anyone's ever been in, you know, even a minor car wreck, not necessarily a catastrophic wreck or a big truck wreck, if you go to your primary care physician, the first thing they'll probably tell you is, oh, I don't want to get involved with injury treatment. One, they don't really do that. And two, all of these insurance coverages that we've been talking about, they don't want to mess with it either. You know, they're used to getting paid through their health insurance, and they don't understand the process either. So there are doctors who, you know, will only take that PIP or no-fault coverage, or they are willing to treat on what's called a lien, which is if you don't have other insurance coverage available to you, or you want someone and you're out of PIP coverage, they will treat you. They will, you know, give you a tentative bill, you know, the value of that medical service. They'll kind of tell you what it is, and then they will tell either you if you're handling it on your own, or your attorney if your attorney's handling it for you, hey, this is how much medical that I've billed for this person. Whenever you settle their case, you know, you ultimately get the settlement at the end of the case. Please make sure, like the payback for private health insurance, I get paid back for my medical services too. And, you know, that's something that we take care of. There are certain providers that overbill in that situation that we have to protect our clients from. Most of them are pretty fair, especially the ones that, you know, we know and are familiar with. Our office will never tell you, you know, you have to use a certain doctor or things, but there are a few doctors that we will steer you away from for your own benefit. Sure. We probably can't talk about that on camera. No, but
well, also, you know, our office does truck wrecks all across the state of Kentucky and the state of Indiana. Can you discuss how Indiana might be a little bit different from Kentucky? Because I know they don't have PIP benefits or PIP coverage in Indiana. Can you discuss that for the viewer?
So that very first line of coverage that we talked about today, the PIP or the no-fault coverage, it's a little bit different in Indiana. It's called MedPay. You do have medical payment coverage available to you up to a certain amount. But the really nice thing about Kentucky is there's very few ways they can deny you that coverage. In Indiana, they have a few more options to kind of gum up the works a little bit. So they can make things difficult. There are certain doctors they may not want to pay for, you know, and MedPay is something that you're responsible for paying back. In Kentucky, the PIP gets paid back directly, pretty much automatically through the claim without you really having to worry about it. So Indiana is a little bit more involved. There's slightly fewer options. You got to get a little bit more creative over there. But yeah, we definitely know how to handle that too.
Okay. And what's MedPay generally? What's the coverage amounts generally over there that you see?
My understanding is the minimum is $5,000, but I'm not sure in Indiana it's even required coverage. So I've seen policies with just without it entirely. But yeah, unlike Kentucky, the $10,000 limit, I think it's very common to have a $5,000 limit for MedPay over in Indiana.
Okay. Rob, do you have anything to discuss in closing?
Yeah, I mean, the final thing that I just want to say is we've gone through all this today. I hope you find this information helpful. It can be a little bit overwhelming, and you know, the number one thing that we see in our practice is that, you know, people after a wreck, they want to focus on getting better. They want to know what their options are. And even though we've given a lot of general information today, you know, every case is different. We really, you know, have to look at the individual case, look at all the insurance policies to make sure people are getting the maximum benefits they're entitled to and are getting them in the easiest way possible so that they can focus on what they need to focus on, which is getting back to normal.
Right, recovery. Yeah. Well, if we can help you out with that and you have questions, please give us our office a call. Stein Whatley Attorneys, serious attorneys, serious results. Our phone number is 502-553-4750. If you found this video helpful, please like and share. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.